Grossman and second.
This is a book that several of us in the coalition co-authored, Who Rules El Paso? If you want to understand the local political structure, who has the power, who manipulates what goes on here, and who has a significant influence in the decisions that are made in the city council, this book has information that you want to know about. You can get it easily through Amazon.com. Just go there and go to Google, type in Who Rules El Paso, and it'll take you directly to the book. It's only $10. It's a bargain. Now, I'm going to mention a second book. It's more expensive because it's longer and because I wrote it. The title here is Latinx El Paso. 83% of the population in the city is Hispanic or Mexican American primarily. And so this is a historical overview of the Hispanic population in El Paso. And there are two chapters on politics. One of the chapters deals with contemporary politics and updates information about this political system that we have here and the dominance of a number of influential people here, some who are billionaires, and how they impact decision-making in the city and what it means for us and for taxpayers. So this is a book that complements our first book and gives you information, historical, but mostly contemporary information about the local Hispanic population. You can also get this book from Amazon.com. Just type in Latinx El Paso. You get it fast, like in 2 or 3 days. And it's $20. I also have announcements of our first book, Who Rules El Paso, if you want to pick up one of these flyers. I have them up here. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Max Grossman. Dr. Grossman has a PhD from Columbia University, and he's been a professor for what, over a decade? 17 years. 17 years. Wow, and it looks so young.
That's why I grew up here.
Well, besides all of his academic work, which is very significant, he's also heavily involved since he came to El Paso. As a professor, he's been heavily involved in history, in historical preservation in particular. I think El Paso is extremely fortunate. We are, as a community, extremely fortunate that Max is our leading force in promoting historical preservation and saving buildings that ought to be saved in this community because they're very valuable to the heritage and the identity of this community. And Max has been in the lead doing this. One of his latest projects is renovating Sacred Heart School or church, Sacred Heart Church. But I said school because I went to Sacred Heart School, and I hope Sacred Heart School gets a little bit of renovation too.
Renovating that too.
Okay, great. And there are other examples of specific buildings that Max has been involved in preserving them. One of his most important activities is with saving the birthplace of El Paso, which is Duranguito. Duranguito, a very, very important community, neighborhood in El Paso. And the city has been hell-bent in destroying Duranguito and putting an arena there, an arena that most people in El Paso didn't. Well, nobody voted for the arena when the bond came up in 2012. They didn't present it that way. The city deceived us. And I'll just go ahead and say it. This is a very deceiving government that I've seen in the last few years. And that's why we have this title, or that phrase in the title of the presentation this morning, are taxpayers being deceived? Anyway, this has created a lot of controversy. Max has been in the lead in fighting the city, saving Duranguito, hoping to convert Duranguito into a historical district so that we can have heritage tourism, which would be great for El Paso if there were a heritage tourism district established in Duranguito, and they can take their arena, put it someplace else. If they want to fund it themselves, they can put it someplace else. But Max has been in the lead and has participated in litigation that has been extremely important in putting a stop to the destructive policies that the city has been pushing all these years. In fact, the issue is now before the Supreme Court of Texas. So we'll be hearing more about what happens. Well, Max follows El Paso politics very closely, especially taxation issues and the activities, the policies, the actions of people on the city council. And he tells it like it is. That's what I love about all this information that Max sends out. And if you are not on his mailing list, you want to get on his mailing list because he provides the best information to keep you up with what's going on in the city. So I think a lot of people, I certainly appreciate all the information that Max shares with us about all these things because they impact us, not in the least as taxpayers. So with that, I'll let Max take over.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martinez. I can vouch. These are two really great books. I read Dr. Martinez's new book recently. Just a wonderful scholarly work, highly recommended. Okay. Collecting more taxes than is absolutely necessary is legalized robbery. President Calvin Coolidge. We started a war back in the 1770s over taxation without representation, right? And this is a battle that has been ongoing ever since. As government expands, as we have unscrupulous politicians imposing their private agenda on the citizenry, we have blowback from people like me and people like you. I want to thank the Community Coalition for inviting me. It's very kind of them to do that. I love this group. They welcome a very wide range of views. Full disclosure, I am a libertarian, okay? And we make common cause on many issues that affect all of us, regardless of your political stripes, okay? So I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you. I'm going to show you a series of 41 images. I'm a professor of art history. I specialize in medieval and Renaissance art and architecture. But one of my hobbies is tracking corruption, deficit spending, and excessive taxation in the city of El Paso. It's something I do in my spare time. Some of you get my emails. Many of you receive my missives. El Paso in 2017 had a population of 683,583 people. Now it has 5,168 people less. Our population has declined by more than 5,000 people. The decline in the last 3 years is the first measurable decline in our population since 1932, since the height of the Great Depression. This is a metric that should scare the hell out of everyone. We learned from our federal census that between 2010 and 2020, the population of our state grew 15.9%. That's the fastest growing state in the United States. Locally, Socorro grew 7.2% in that period. Horizon City grew 24.4% in those 10 years. But El Paso grew only 4.6%. And the 4.6% figure, which is anemic, is the figure that has been reported in our local media. What the media has not reported, with the exception of El Paso Matters, kudos to them, is that from 2017 until 2021, the last year for which we have data available, we've lost 5,168 people. That was just in the last few years. A decline of 0.08%, nearly 1% decline. More worrying is when we look at what's happening right next to us. During the census period, 2010 to 2020, while El Paso grew only 4.6%, Las Cruces grew 14.1%. Sunland Park grew 18.4%. Santa Teresa grew 18.5%. Why do you suppose there is this disparity between our anemic growth, indeed our negative growth, and the double-digit growth of the communities right next to us, which are smaller and poorer? Let's leave that as an open question just for the moment. You already know the answer. A lot of kudos to El Paso Matters. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't a big fan of the El Paso Times when Bob Moore was editor, but just lately, the last couple of years, El Paso Matters has produced some really quality work. And they've been reporting things that other news outlets have not been reporting. This data here comes from Bob Moore. He looked at 2019 and 2020 and studied the population outflow from El Paso, Texas. And he identified the 12 most significant cities that relate to this outflow. Phoenix had a net gain of 706 El Pasoans. That is, when you gauge how many people from Phoenix come here and how many leave here for Phoenix, 706 went from El Paso to Phoenix in 2019 and 2020. Las Cruces, 443, San Antonio, 388, and so on and so forth. San Diego was the only place where we had more people from San Diego coming here than El Pasoans going there for some reason. Bob Moore rightfully points out that 4 of these cities in yellow have large military communities, important bases. And so our soldiers, probably some of them might be going to those places because of transfers. But all in all, a net outflux of 2,916 people in just those 2 years. Let me correct myself. It's not 2,916 people, it's 2,916 households. On average, households are more than one person. So that is a significant number of people, especially when you look at the communities in Texas. We have to ask ourselves, why is this happening? Our media has not provided any analysis of this. It's a statistic that is just sitting there right in front of us. And it should be alarming to every El Paso, most of all to our city and county leaders. Why is El Paso shrinking? Moore argues low wages. I've heard other arguments, but I'm going to say, you guessed it, insanely high property taxation. I live in West El Paso. A home in my community carries a total property tax burden of 3.12%. That means I have to come up with 3.12% of the total value of my home every year and turn that over to 5 taxing entities. There's no tax right after that. That's something I have to do every year the rest of my life. But when I pay off my mortgage, I will continue to have to do that. This represents the 3rd highest homestead property tax rate among the 50 largest cities in the United States, which is quite a significant figure when you think about that. That's tax rate. I want to be clear about that. This is from the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy and the Minnesota Center for Fiscal Excellence, which every year send out their 50 state property tax report. It's an impressive report based on sound scientific metrics. Okay, so if a $150,000 home in West El Paso carries a burden of 3.12%, about $4,700, a home with the same value in Las Cruces carries an effective burden of 1.05%, or $1,571. That is 2/3 less than El Paso. The median household income in Cruces is about $5,500 less, and the median home price there is about $21,600 more. This is an incredible disparity. And of course, we've all heard, yes, they've got an income tax. It's New Mexico. We're now way past the point where that income tax compensates for this disparity. Now, when you move to Las Cruces or Santa Teresa or Sunland Park, financially, in terms of your home value, you win. Wasn't the case 10 or 15 years ago. just looking at only the tax rate, I did my own research based on that Lincoln study. And I plotted the tax rates of the 5 most taxed cities in the United States. Number 1 is Detroit, hard to see there. That is its tax rate over time. Unfortunately, for some reason, it's not projecting very well. But in any case, you can see it's the most taxed city in the country. They just emerged from bankruptcy, okay? Milwaukee is here. They're number 2. They were number 3 for years, but they just surpassed us by a hair in 2021. We are number 3, steadily rising, followed by San Antonio and Portland, Oregon, which are a bit below us. This just is a glance at the property tax rates of 5 of the largest cities in the country. Let's take a closer look now at us. These rates that I'm showing you here are based on living in the El Paso Independent School District, EPISD. And as we heard just a few minutes ago, there are 5 taxing entities, right? Your tax bill consists of 5 taxing entities. El Paso County, EPISD, or wherever you live, it could be YISD or Socorro, EPCC, and University Medical Center. And I just plotted on this simple chart the tax rates in 2017. This is based on, this is in pennies. So right there, for example, in 2017, you paid 80 cents for every $100 of valuation of your property to the city of El Paso. 45 cents to the county, $1.31 to the school district, 14 cents to EPCC, 25 cents to University Medical Center. Your total tax rate was 2.96% in 2017. And then I'm showing you 2018, 2022, for the last fiscal year, 91 cents. The city council just voted to lower that, we'll come to that, to 86 cents. The county tax rate since 2017 has gone up 3.7%. EPISD has gone down 3.37% in 4 years. EPCC has gone down 0.5% in 4 years. And UMC has gone up 2.46% in 4 years. The city up 12.93% tax rate in 4 years. You add all those up, and our total tax burden, if you live in EPISD, is 3.1245%. 3rd highest in America. How many of you know who this is? Hands up. Interesting. 3/4 of you don't. Let me introduce you to Robert Cortines, Chief Financial Officer, CFO of the City of El Paso. This is the guy who, together with his team, works with the city manager and determines tax policy, comes up with financial strategy, presents it to the city council, which generally rubber stamps it, because there's hardly anybody on city council with any financial acumen whatsoever. You look at their 8 bios, it's stunning how little financial knowledge there is in our city council. We all know that financial policy is driven by staff. And this man here is the brain behind our tax rate and much of our financial policy. Here's an interesting chart. Now I've taken a city chart. This is a chart that they update every year that shows us our property tax rate and breaks it down in green, debt servicing, and blue, general fund. And you can see from 2003 to 2022, how our tax rate declined slightly, reaching its bottom between, in 2009 and 2010, and then climbing slightly. Tommy Gonzalez is appointed city manager on June 23rd, 2014. And from that moment, we've seen the most precipitous decline in our tax rate in El Paso history. There's Dee Margot entering the scene on June 27th, 2017, with his famous pledge: hold the line on taxes. Promised every single one of you. Got slaughtered in his re-election bid, primarily for his failure to live up to that promise. Only got 20% of the vote, even though he outspent his opponent something like $2 to 1. An incumbent. Mayor Leeser comes in January 5th, 2021, and our tax rate is held at 91 cents for 2 fiscal years, and now lowered, I'm going to come to that, to 86 cents. Now let's talk about our new tax rate. 86 cents. We've gone from 91 to 80. Hallelujah, right? Wow. We're saying that's the city's message. We have lowered your tax rate. And then all of the media falls into line. KVIA, KTSN, KFOX, CBS 4, Telemundo 48. All uncritically report our tax rate is lower. Yep. I love this movie. There he is, Joe Pesci, mafioso, talking to the car dealer. Thanks for lowering the rate to 86 cents, but we're still going to collect more revenue because it's a tax hike, you dummy. Okay? It's a tax hike. Why is it a tax hike? Because it's not enough to talk about tax rate. You have to talk about your valuations. Our valuations have gone up precipitously. The other 4 taxing entities, when they voted on their tax rate, have achieved a no new revenue rate. All of them. There's some fluctuations there in the county, a little gray area there. But generally, they all aimed for a no new. We're the only one. Yeah, we lowered our tax rate for the city down to 86 cents. But the average tax burden increased by $83 for the average homeowner across the city. It was a tax hike because they did not fully compensate for the increase in your home valuations. Duh, right? And they want us to believe that somehow they've lowered our taxes. And we're told that they could not come up with $17 million in savings to achieve a no new revenue rate. The other 4 taxing entities bending over backwards, shaving, cutting, because they understand how hard things are for us right now, with inflation especially. Not the city. We couldn't find 17 million. Okay. Nothing has made me more angry than this. This is City Rep Sandra Hernandez. I'm quoting her, not out of context, but in context. She's having a discussion with Connie Gonzalez on March 20th, 2018. I shared with you by email the video cut. Quote, "It would be in our best interest, including every taxing entity, to ensure that all of the homes are being appraised at a higher level so that we can see more valuations and more tax revenue." Unbelievable. She'll have to run on that if she ever runs in the future. She has the courage to. Okay. I've never seen a political statement like that ever in the 13 years that I've been in El Paso. Not covered by the media. It just slipped right through, you know, this little discussion, but I yanked it out at hour 1 and 57 minutes and 12 seconds and stuck it on YouTube for posterity. Because this is what's going on, right? We've got city council reps. What's that? She said it. Yeah, she said it. I mean, this goes beyond hot mic moment. If we could just raise all of our valuations, we can collect more revenue. Well, you know what? She got what she asked for. Here it is. Property valuation changes by El Paso Central Appraisal District 2021 to 2022. This comes courtesy of El Paso Matters and their team. 19.9% increase on average in El Paso County, not city, but county, in the last year, 19.9%. And this comes after a 12% increase in the previous year. This is the most gigantic increase in home valuations in the history of our community. Yes, exactly. There you see 19.9% single family homes is the increase in the last year in property values. Then you've got multifamily homes, 22.4% increase. Commercial properties went up 7.4%. Industrial properties dropped 0.6%. And I'm looking at single family homes. It's a good metric to study. 19.9%. And here's one of the most incredible figures. Another metric that gets ignored by our government. But there it is staring at us in the face. This is a quote from Cynthia Ramirez, again, El Paso Matters. This year, for example, residential properties comprised 67.1% of the county's property tax base. That's up slightly from 65.8% in 2021. In other Texas counties, residential properties account for 40% or less of the total taxable property value. So let me get this straight. Everywhere else in Texas, residential property owners bear 40% of the property tax burden. 60% is borne by the commercial sector. Here, it's the opposite. It's inverse. 2/3 of our entire tax burden is borne by us, and 1/3 is borne by the commercial sector. How did this happen? Why are we upside down? This is Bob Moore again. I know I'm quoting them a lot, but they're unique in covering these issues. Moore did an analysis of total tax burden, not tax rate, okay, not tax rate, but the actual dollar tax burden on average for residents of the 3 school districts, UPISD, Isleta, and Socorro. And there you can see from 2012 to 2021, in blue, UPISD, on average, the tax burden for a homeowner has gone from $3,900 to $4,500. Socorro from $3,520 to, I can't see the figure, but something like $4,400. And then Isleta, $2,700 to $3,160. So you can see that all 3 are going up. And they're going up faster than the inflation rate historically. Okay, and that's important to keep in mind. In the same report, Moore looked at 2 property owners. He looked at a woman named Perla Aguilera and showed how this homeowner, a single mom trying to raise her family, was paying $4,100 in property tax in 2012. And 9 years later was paying $5,845, an increase of 43%. 43%. That's $1,700 more. For this property owner, and this should also worry people, this is an investment property. And Lisa Salas owns a home, but bought another one to rent out. Your second property, the one that you rent out to try and earn money, does not get any exemptions. You don't get an exemption of any kind, not from the school district, and you don't get a homestead exemption either. You have to pay the full burden. 57% increase. And that's typical for rental properties. Now, if you're a property owner and you're renting out units in the Segundo Barrio to people who don't have much money, or if you're renting out homes in the Upper Valley and you're facing a 57% increase in a decade, who bears that increase? Not me. The renter. The rents go up. Okay, and that's what you're going to see. It's happening already. The rents go up. Do you think that wages in El Paso are going to keep up with that? No, people are just going to be squeezed. And our poverty rate is going to rise. What is driving up our city taxes? Our city tax of the 5 taxing entities is going up far faster than the others, right? Couple stats. From the time Tommy Gonzalez assumed office in 2014 through now, our city tax rate has increased 38%. 38%, that's the tax rate, okay, 38%. Now it's been lowered to 86%, so it's come down a little bit, but up until now. Tommy Gonzalez and CFO Robert Cortinas have admitted publicly that the quality of life bond projects have been weighing heavily on our city tax burden. and driving up our property tax rate. So they actually said that. They're on the record. Others will cite police and fire. Police and fire obviously make up most of our budget. I mean, they make up the most important portion of the city budget. And these are powerful unions that see to their interests and get what's coming. Okay, historically, they've had very, should we call them solid contracts, right? To cover salary as well as benefits. Not criticizing, I'm just pointing it out, okay? I found this morning. I downloaded the 2022 city budget for fiscal year 2022. And they used to have a very large chart that showed long-term revenues versus expenditures. But for 2022, the chart is tiny and squeezed into the corner of page 347. I pulled it out and blew it up for your viewing pleasure. Now, I'm not a mathematician, I'm an art historian, but I can read this. Red is revenues. Green is expenditures. Now, hold on a second. Revenues, let's see, 2022, we're here. Expected revenues going forward are going to look like that until 2026. Expected expenditures are going to go like that. This is after all of these tax hikes. Now let's look at property tax rate. Let's see, 91 cents, that's today. City's telling us that we're going to get up to 98 cents in 2025. They're going to have to update this chart, I know, because they haven't factored in their new 86-cent rate yet. But you see a general picture there of deficit spending, of spending more than we have, of an increasing rate of expenditure going forward. Will that red line ever meet that green line? I've never seen them touch in the 13 years I've been looking at city budgets. And they just keep widening. One of my favorite quotes of all time, John Adams: facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passion, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. So, with the power of reason that God gave us, we can look at these basic facts and evaluate them for ourselves, independently of the media, and start looking at the boondoggles that are driving up our taxes. And I use that word intentionally. Boondoggles. Projects that are insolvent, okay? We're American, we love baseball. The ballpark was never voted upon. Okay? It was never voted upon. It was created by fiat, by our first city manager, Joyce Wilson. It was going to cost $50 million. Everyone said, oh, $50 million, we can afford that. Then it was changed to $64 million. Then they decided to demolish City Hall, a $13.5 million asset, and the Insights Museum, a $1.5 million asset. And by the way, City Hall had just been renovated. Almost $10 million had been poured into it in the previous 2 years. Gone. Then they moved the city into 5 different buildings that had to be separately renovated, with separate maintenance staff and separate budgets. As I'm standing before you, the city is now in 7 different buildings, scattered all across the city, whereas they used to have 1 with city-owned parking.
I think you call it was brought up to voting, but the question was set up in a way that the voter was tricked into voting for.
No, let me correct you, because I know what you're getting at. We never voted on the ballpark. We voted on whether or not to earmark hot tax funds to subsidize it. And we were told, if you don't give hot tax funds, hotel occupancy tax funds to this ballpark, we're going to raise your taxes. Everybody say, oh, we don't want that. Let's just put it on tourists. And so now we have the highest hot tax rate in America, tied to Trenton, New Jersey, 17.5%. That's the only thing you were allowed to vote on, was that one financial instrument. You were never asked whether or not you wanted a ballpark. You were never asked whether or not you wanted City Hall demolished. You were never asked whether you wanted the city to live in 7 different buildings. None of these things. What is the total cost of this project? Total cost of this project is hard to calculate, but every year there's a spreadsheet that comes out. I delight in reading it because it's just so fun. But I'm showing you the spreadsheet for the ballpark just from 2014 to 2019. Now just forget about baseball, the Chihuahuas, and hot dogs for a second, okay? And just look at how much this thing costs. 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay. Total hotel occupancy tax subsidies. Right here, this line here. So far in those 6 years, the ballpark has received $18 million in subsidies from the hotel tax. And by the way, when you raise the hotel tax from 15.5 to 17.5%, which is what they did to achieve that, less people stay in our hotels. They've got choices. They can go to Las Cruces, for example, or outside the city of El Paso, where the hotel tax is going to be less. 18 million in hot subsidies. The general fund, that wasn't supposed to happen, but so far 2.5 million in general fund subsidies from 2014 to 2019. Okay, how much revenue has our ballpark produced in that same period? Exactly $5.1 million on the revenue line. $5.1 million in revenue, of which 1.5 million is ticket sales. To put that in perspective, I looked it up this morning. The average McDonald's restaurant in America produces $2.7 million in revenue. Our ballpark, which cost over $150 million, I'm going to show you in a moment, produces less revenue than 2 McDonald's. So let me rephrase that. Has produced less revenue than 2 McDonald's from 2014 to 2019. That figure for McDonald's is yearly. I'm talking about a 6-year spread. So let me rephrase that. From 2014 to 2019, our ballpark has produced less revenue in those 6 years than 2 McDonald's stores produce in 1 year. That's on the taxpayer side of the balance sheet. Mountain Star Sports Group, which owns the franchise, concessions, and everything else, we don't know what they make or lose. We don't get to know. That's private. Have attempts been made to find out? You bet. We have no idea. I suspect that they're not losing money. I suspect that we're losing a lot more money. One time I actually tried to calculate in 2019 how much the ballpark cost. As of 2019, when you include cost overrun of 14 million, the appraised value of City Hall when it was demolished, the appraised value of the Insights Museum when it was demolished, the acquisition costs of the properties when they moved to the city, the cost of renovating them, bond interest, etc. 160 million. Subtract the revenue, 156 million. The total cost of the taxpayer in terms of subsidies, loss of assets, right? Incentives. It was supposed to be 50 million. So triple. You'll see that this is a figure that the city loves. Triple. Children's Museum, triple. Arena, triple. Coming to that. Boondoggle number 2. Quality of life bond projects. Here's something I put together in 2018, so it's not up to date. I didn't have time to do everything today. But just looking at 2018, there were 2 propositions, Proposition 1 and Proposition 2, that appeared on the ballot on November 6, 2012. We all got to vote, right? Proposition 1 and Proposition 2, which added up, the 2 of them, to $473.25 million. Proposition 2 included the Arena, Children's Museum, Mexican American Cultural Center, and Digital Wall. Of those 4 projects, only the Digital Wall is finished. The Children's Museum is under construction. The Mexican American project is underway. The Arena is stopped in the courts. Okay, that's Proposition 2. But in any case, in 2018, of $280.5 million in projects that were budgeted for or underway or in some phase of development, $126 million extra was thrown in beyond what was voted upon in 2012. for an overrun of 45% total. So think about that. You buy a candy bar at the grocery store, you see it says $2. You go to the cash register to pay for it, and you're told that it's $2.80, $2.90, right? It's called bait and switch. We vote on something where the price tag is on the ballot. I'm reading the price tag on the ballot, and then later, without my permission, the city council issues new debt and makes it more expensive at will. I'm not even sure if that's legal. Hope it's not. The arena. There's a fun project. Something I know a little bit about. Very popular in El Paso. We just love riot police, destroying history, displacing dozens of people, okay? There are just a few simple facts. There are 12 buildings in the arena footprint that have been nominated for the National Register of Historic Places. That is, they're important culturally and historically, not just to El Paso, not just to Texas, but to our country. It's the highest level of recognition possible in our nation. 12 buildings eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. Some 39 people who are vulnerable and defenseless were uprooted and expelled from their homes. Yes, they were offered 2 years of rent. Here's the thing. We're going to expel you and remove you from your home and dismantle your community, no matter what. But here's 2 years of rent. Okay, you're taking care of it, right? Dismantling tenements where people live together and support each other and help each other, where they get a leg up in our country, where they have community. No, we'll just move them like furniture. Then, on October 18th, 2016, the city authorizes itself to use eminent domain to acquire and demolish anything they want. Not only in the 5.4 acre arena footprint, but in the 11 plus acre master plan area, which is much larger than the arena footprint. That have that authority. Not to build a freeway, not to build a police station, but G League basketball and Beyonce concerts. Whoa, now that's a reason to demolish buildings and take people's private property in the United States of America, in Texas. Intolerable. Certificates of obligation. Until last year, when you went to the Texas Comptroller's website, you read that certificates of obligation are to be used for emergency purposes only. That was the guidance for the state of Texas. As of a couple of years ago, Dallas and Houston, two very large cities, combined had less than $40 million in CO debt. A certificate obligation is a debt instrument. It's a method for issuing debt without your approval, you the voters. Okay? It's un-American. It's immoral. Traditionally, in the history of our city, in the history of Texas cities, large debt issuances go on the ballot. And the government has to sell it to you, the voter, and give you the choice about whether or not to issue the debt. Then there's El Paso. $568.7 million as of a couple of years ago. Figure is now higher, but I'm just sticking to the facts. I can tell you that there are representatives on city council, like Peter Schwartzbein, I name names, okay, who have voted for $504.8 million of that. Most of this debt was issued in the last 5 years, okay? And I have tabulated which city reps voted for which CO issuances and lined them all up. And I talk about the $500 million club. A number of our city reps are in the $500 million, issuing $500 million of debt without our approval. People who have qualifications like photographer, issuing that kind of debt, putting that on us and our grandchildren. This is from the Texas Bond Review Board, state agency that tracks bond issuances. Let's see. El Paso, $568.7 million in CO debt, $833 per capita. Number one in Texas. Love the trolleys. Come on.
Yeah.
Love the trolleys. They're beautiful. They're historic. They're pretty. They're insolvent. They run along a single route between the Segundo Barrio and UTEP. Okay, you cannot make this stuff up. I mean, how do you make something like that profitable? Maybe you run it from the airport to downtown. That would work. For example. No, you run it in an endless loop that goes nowhere. That's what you do. In June, see this past June, CBS 4 report. I want you to just take note of this in your mind. Okay. Once in a while, a reporter, and I track reporters, they come out with a doozer. Hats off to CBS 4. Trolleys now run only 21 hours per week, carry an average of 3,000 passengers each month, and cost $425 an hour to run. On average, between 1 and 2 people ride a trolley per hour. It loses $47 for each $1 in revenue collected.
Where's the $1 revenue come from?
From people paying their fare.
There's no fare on the phone.
Not anymore. But if you add, but there was before. And if you do the math, I mean, if I actually recalculated this based on what we've learned in the last year or two since I came up with these figures, I don't know.
It loses $425 an hour.
Well, it loses $425 an hour, and that's according to CBS 4. And their sources the city. They did an open records request. And I talked to the reporter, seems solid. In any case, I can tell you that Joe Pickett's trolley, because he has one, number 1510 from 1932. It's sitting on in his backyard now. He'll eventually restore it. Apparently, it has more ridership than any of the city's trolleys. I was in there with him and another person. That's 3 of us that were in there simultaneously, which is more than ride a trolley on average per hour in the city of L. I'm just saying. Not only that, on my Facebook pages, sometimes I put up trolley sightings where you actually see people riding inside, and people with video cameras go like that. There's somebody in there.
There was a DJ, didn't they block off?
They've tried everything. They've had concerts inside, mariachis inside, Adair Margot giving tours. Okay, not working. Not working. But we can't find $17 million to get no new revenue tax rate. It's impossible, right? It's impossible. We have to lay off people. Okay. Number 5, incentives for developers. Build it and they shall come, we are told. You deserve this. You deserve that. Booming down to us from Cassandra and the other city council reps. Once in a while, the Oligarchy Gazette, aka El Paso Inc., comes up with an interesting report that matters. Okay, David Crowder is no longer there, so there are no longer any reports that matter. But in any case, there was one by David Crowder on January 12th, 2020. Quote, the city of El Paso has 96 incentive agreements with developers, some of which are not yet active, that would rebate $231 million in property and sales taxes that developers have paid or will pay over the life of their agreements. So we have been doling out candy to the oligarchs, that's what I call them, because that's what they are, to the tune of 9 figures. Not 7 or 8 figures, 9 figures. And what are these? The city has what are called 380 agreements. I'm a developer, I want to restore a building. I have access now to this entity called the city manager. I go to economic development, which is in the Anson Mills building. Across the hall from the Borderplex Alliance, that's convenient. Can you say incest? Okay. And there I can sit down behind closed doors and negotiate an agreement with Jessica Herrera. Oh, I'm sorry, she's gone. With whoever replaced Jessica Herrera. Okay. And then it'll go through city council, just whisked right through. It'll appear on the agenda. What's that? I don't know. Okay. All right. You add up all of these little agreements throughout the city, and you're in the hundreds of millions. How many of these 380 agreements pan out for the taxpayer? Well, if you read David Crowder's report, a lot of them don't. And you can also read Aaron Montes, some of the work that he did. I don't know how much. The city doesn't tell us. City of El Paso, are these 380 agreements working out for us? Would you please present us with a balance sheet? Good luck with that. That'll go to the Attorney General and never see the light of day. Okay. So this is a problem. The county has what are called 381 agreements, which are similar. But it's really on the city side where the most generous perks are doled out. But by far and away, the most egregious giveaway in El Paso history is tax increment reinvestment zone, that is TERS 13. Our city council voted 6-2 in 2020 to give Paul Foster and his Dallas partner 75% property tax forgiveness for a half century on anything built in 2,313 acres in northeast El Paso. Aaron Moe just told me that is something like $650 million of tax revenue that our taxing entities will not collect. You see, ladies and gentlemen, denial of tax revenue is one of the reasons why, I would say it's the primary reason why homeowners here bear 2/3 of the tax burden, through denial of revenue, through boondoggle giveaways in the form of sports venues that benefit people with a private agenda, in the form of 380 and 381 agreements, in the form of TERSs, the most egregious thing ever. What is a tax increment reinvestment zone? It is an instrument that is supposed to relieve blight in urban areas. Then you have El Paso, where we established TERSs in open space. How much blight is there in open space? Are the coyotes crowded together? They got a problem with the snakes? Makes no sense, right?
A lot of both.
And by the way, how did this happen? The Great Wolf Lodge land swap. Now, the Great Wolf Lodge deal, Tommy came to El Paso and already during his interviews was trying to sell this deal. I ran the numbers. It was $106 million total in tax incentives between city, state, and county. And they were only required to invest $100 million in capital. So already before the deal even began, Great Wolf Lodge was $6 million ahead before they even built it. The most lopsided deal ever. That thing died. Carla Neiman was asked by Cassandra Hernandez in City Council, Ms. Neiman, if the Great Wolf Lodge deal dies, will the land swap with Paul Foster die as well? And she said, it will absolutely die. Great Wolf Lodge dies. We cannot do the land swap and give Paul Foster 2,313 acres of PSV land. It's in the contract. Well, guess what? It's not in the contract. I read the contract. Aaron Moe just read the contract. Other journalists read the contract. The deal went through. And then immediately after that, TERS 13, and you've got this gigantic 2/3 of $1 billion giveaway over the next half century. Okay. Public safety bond, $413 million. Look, we all need our police and fire. Do we need a $90 million police? What? In New York City, 90 million. This was voted upon. Okay, this was voted upon. Like all public safety bonds, a firm will be hired, or an individual, or two or three. Promote this. There'll be a campaign to promote it. We all love our policemen. We all love our firemen. Blah, 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 blah. The voter, yeah, of course. My neighbor's a fireman. Firemen put out that fire over their lap. Yeah, we need these people. $413 million. The school bonds also, $400 million at a time. And you just wonder how much of that was actually necessary and whether the money is being spent efficiently. Okay, I want to conclude with a few points. The city imposed a new tax rate of 86 cents per $100 of valuation, which is a tax hike of an average of $83 per property owner per year on average. In my case, it's more like $180 a year. All of you can do your calculations. It's more. The city refused to lower the tax rate to 82 cents, which would have put it in line with the other taxing entities and yielded no tax increase. They did not do that because they said they could not come up with $17 million. How ridiculous is that? This is the same city that doubled our commitment to the El Paso Children's Museum from 19.5 million to 40 million. This is the same city that finds money all over the place for the ballpark, hundreds of millions of dollars in incentive agreements, $500 million plus in just one TERS, not to speak of all the others. Trolleys that run empty. And now the city is putting up another bond. It's going on the ballot in November. It's got the creepiest name, Community Progress Bond, 273 million, 80% of which is streets. Isn't that convenient? Now the city can say, you want your streets repaired? Here's how we're going to do it. We're putting this to a vote. We're going to issue $273 million in debt. And by the way, interest on debt has doubled in the last 2 years, right? The cost of servicing debt, new debt, has doubled in the last couple of years, and it will continue to go up. Community Progress Bond. Okay, my first question is $273 million with 80% of it for streets. Why is this not covered by the general fund? Why can't we fund street repair through taxation from our properties? What about that? Other cities seek to do that. Why do we have to issue bonds that are 9 figures each in order to pay for stuff that is supposed to be paid for by the general fund? Answer, the city has spent so much on so many things that are useless and non-essential that they move the essential stuff into bond issuances and say, here. We have an election coming up. Okay, I'm not allowed to promote candidates. This is the most important election ever. Ever. Okay? And you're being presented with with choices in 4 of these 8 districts. I'm not going to share here my opinion, but I will via email and in my Facebook post. So I'm pretty easy to find. And there's a very clear choice for each one of these district elections. Everybody needs to vote, get every friend to vote, and push back against this private agenda that is bankrupting us, against these 20 families who see El Paso as a gigantic milk cow, okay? Where we're the suckers here, doling out all this money for our property taxes at these incredibly high rates, in large part to fund the private agenda of unscrupulous investors. And I say that as a red-blooded capitalist libertarian who believes in private enterprise. What's happening in El Paso is un-American. I'll say it again, it's un-American. To issue debt of this magnitude without voter approval, to raise our taxes arbitrarily. Okay? Vote them out. Vote them out. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. We have plenty of time for taxes. I was just starting. Yeah. Trying to see if you were awake. Okay, questions? Let's have some discussion. Yes, sir.
Dr. Grossman. Almost all,
Please call me Max.
all of these projects were driven by the issue of private investment. The premise would be premise that this would create tax values, would create property value that would subsequently provide revenues that would county. Does any of that happen? I remember Portland Island fell that trolleys have a 10-to-1 return. I'm assuming she means property values along the property. As any of this these things that we pay.
No, and the city council knows, I mean, G League basketball arenas are unprofitable across the country, even almost bankrupt. This trolley project. Yeah, we were told we profit, we were told that the ballpark is completely solvent within a couple of years. But here we are, 79 years out, and it's still insolvent. And it depends on how you define insolvency. I'll call that project solvent, but it doesn't require one level of subsidy to tax or the general fund. Well, then it's solvent. Okay. Build it and they will come is a bankrupt strategy. It does not work. It does not work. And the city has this habit of never putting a business plan. The arena was. I didn't even get into it, but 180 million was earmarked, and it was already underfunded. The city puts out an RFQ in 2016 for a 15,000 seat basketball arena with jumbotron and locker rooms, which does not correspond at all to multi-purpose performing arts and entertainment facility on the ballot under the heading Museum, Cultural, and Performing Arts. Okay. So this is what they do. And they hire a consultant who is an expert in deceiving voters. He wrote a book on how to deceive voters in order to ram through sports arenas. This is how our city ends. The thing is this. If you do the comps on a 15,000 seat venue, convertible for concerts, you cannot build one for under $500 million. And actually today, given the double-digit inflation, especially for construction of labor and materials, $600 million minimum. So what would that do to us? There's no hot tax, by the way, for it. Like for the ballpark, which costs a third of that. It would destroy us. It would just sink us financially. So even if you don't care about history and culture, you don't care about the plight of the poor, move the poor Mexican Americans out of the way. There are a lot of people in El Paso who think like that, unfortunately. Even if you don't think like that, think with your pocketbook. You want to pay $1,000 more a year in cleaning? How much do you want to pay? Right? It's totally unsustainable. So to answer your question, the city behind closed doors knows this. But they're out there appeasing these 20 families. Always appeasing the 20 families. And you read the book, and you learn that it really is only a small number of families who call shots, and that they account for well over half of all donations in elections. They have disproportionate power. There are 20 of them and 678,000 of us. Yeah.
I've never been to visit this, but then, I have a serious concern because my house went from $90,000 value to $243,000. And it's in the northwestern part of Canutillo. My neighbors have chickens, dogs, pigs. My next door neighbor has a horse. The guy next door has a bunch of dogs and stuff. So it was inconceivable for me. Been a lot of stress for me. But I think that I always look at the grassroots of it all. Have you all noticed the immense amount of people coming in from the northeast, Cielo Vista area, and from downtown going to Mexico? The immense amount of people going to Mexico? Well, I had a beautiful teacher in economics. Her name was Cindy Williams. She did her master's thesis in 1999, I believe. It's probably not 2000. She said that every kid that they drop off here to go to Bowie, all the high schools, or primary schools, secondary schools, and everything, they're coming and going every single day. According to Cindy Williams, you could look up her master's thesis in Utah. She said that every child that crosses over every day will be incurring $250,000 from the time the child is from going to Head Start all the way to high school. Now, who's paying for that? It's us. And then one of the things, she kind of simplified it because actually I did really good at that. This is the way she said to simplify it. El Pasoans have a little village and we're 10 people. Now every 10 of those people have to give $1 for for that little school to pay for the gas, water, electric, for the teacher, for the maintenance guy. And then our little friends from across the border, or the other friends from the other village, not to say any names, they cross over every day. And now they come up to you and ask you, well, hold on a second, now we have 1,000 children coming to that school, it's not 10 anymore. So now you gotta fork over $1,000. So because now we have to have an artificial football field, we have to have new maintenance, we have a new building, we have to do this, we have to hire new people, do this, and that. So to simplify things, is that less and less and less people are paying for property taxes to facilitate the needs of those people crossing over every single day. Now,
And then we can move on.
so that's the question. The question is, how true is that impact on us, that the city of El Paso doesn't incur costs with people crossing over every single day, working here, living here, but not contributing to property taxes? So that's my question.
I don't have information on this, but I sense that our property tax burden is unrelated to people coming across the border from that country.
Well,
Okay, thank you.
Let's move on. One other question.
Yeah, let me just respond to one thing you said though, sir, which is this, that,
Speak a little louder.
I just want to say one quick comment to what he said about the increase in his taxes. The number one investment of every family is their home. It's the American dream, to buy a home and to finance that home and eventually to own that home. When our taxing entities increase our property tax burden, it devalues our home because you'll sell it at a lower price as a result. They're inversely related, right? The higher the taxes, the lower the cost of the home. Home values in El Paso are being suppressed by taxation. I want to earn a profit when I sell my home. When I leave my home to my children, maybe they'll sell it for 5 times what I bought it for. No. Yes, homes have gone up a lot in the last couple of years, but not as much as in other cities. And so that's one of the most sinister things about taxation. It devalues our most valuable asset, our property. Yes.
Okay, you went over the bond issue that's coming up for the city, the streets, etc. What about the bond issue that's coming up before county commissioners?
I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, and I've been involved in that too. So the county has normally behaved much better than the city. And I'm just going to say there's better leadership generally than the city by a long shot. UMC is a sub-entity of the county. And so what happened is, the last time UMC issued a bond was in 2007. It was around 150 million, and they put it to a vote, and it passed by 500 votes, but it passed. Okay. Now what happens is Jacob Cintron, the CEO of UMC, convenes the board of managers of UMC, and they decide together, among all their options, that they're going to issue a CO in the amount of $346 million. When they hold that meeting, they do not put that on their agenda properly. They don't even put the price. They haven't even put up their videos of their meetings for a year and a half. That's the lack of transparency that we see there. 2 days after that vote, it appears on the agenda of the Commissioners Court, which is about to vote on publishing notice of a CO issuance of $346 million. No backup. And so we don't even see on the agenda the number 346 million, what they're doing, what they're planning to do. They hope to ram it through. They got caught with their hand in the cookie jar because a citizen was in there in that board of managers meeting and recorded it. And we learned everything. Then it was turned over to the media, then the blowback. And before you know it, 2 citizen petitions to fight this issuance. Texas law says that if you can muster 5% of the voting public and have them oppose a CO issuance, that's dead, the CO issuance. Yesterday at 2:15 p.m., 35,000 signatures were turned in. They only needed 25,164. They got 10,000 more than they needed. Dead. The citizens have spoken. This terrifies our government leaders. and especially the city, which is addicted to these CO issuances. Now you've got an organization, okay? Yes, they're right-wing, Koch brothers, I know. But if you read the petition is something we can all agree on. The language is no CO. The petition is not, let's stop the hospital from expanding or let's prevent them from issuing debt. No, it says no COs. If you want to issue debt, put it on the ballot. We live in a constitutional republic. Do it correctly. Let us vote on it. Sell it to us. If it makes sense, we'll vote yes. If not, we'll vote no. So that was a major, major thing that happened. And not a single local media outlet has reported this yet. Just one blogger who was in Florida, Martin Paredes, broke the news of this. As of this morning, I still haven't read anything in the paper or in television, nothing. Okay, so there is an instance where the people stood up and said enough. Now, my hope, just to answer your question, is that it will appear on the ballot and that the county hospital will have an opportunity to sell us this cancer ward and these essential services. And, you know, if I really do think it's absolutely necessary, I'll vote for it. But I want to hear the argument, and I want that ask to be subjected to maximum scrutiny. Maybe they can knock off 50 mil, for example, and still get the essential out of it.
So what you're saying is that, county commissioners are supposed to vote on it on the 12th.
They're supposed to vote on Monday, but that vote is now stopped. They cannot vote on it because Texas law kicks in. And now the county clerk is counting 35,000 signatures. It's going to take the county clerk some time. And once they're counted, it will be announced whether or not, yes or no, did they achieve 25,164. If the answer is yes, the CO is dead. Absolutely. This is something that has never been achieved in El Paso. It's new. It's new. Yeah.
Max, first of all, thank you for an excellent presentation. It reminded me of the Untitled Chapter went around promoting the idea of state income tax, and he had his charts and all that, and he went across the whole state, and of course didn't receive any kind of support for it in this state, which deals with taxation. It's an issue of taxation, since we rely on the property taxes and the sales tax to finance, you know, our state government for the most part. But by the way, I wore my Texas Longhorn shirt because I knew you were going to read it.